Hey guys, we're back here in the core garage, and today we're just going to be going over some of the more advanced fixes with the Whisperlite stove. If you haven't watched the first video, go ahead and do that, because I'm going to assume you have. And yeah, today we'll get into some cool fixes. So the first thing that's going to be really important for this lesson is our stove repair kit. We use the MSR Expedition size stove repair kit. They make a smaller one. They're both super useful, and I just want to show you mine. So this is the Expedition sized repair kit from MSR, and we're going to use almost everything in here today. There's new jets, new O-rings for everything. Almost every part of the stove is in this kit. It's super awesome. And the only thing we're not going to use today, there's a couple retrofitting parts in here. This is to replace stoves that we don't use. So if these fit on your stove, you're using an old school MSR stove. So there's some retrofit parts in here. And then there's also this guy. It's a fuel wick. And this is for running other fuels in our stove. So if we're burning, say, unleaded gasoline in here, since we're on an international trip where we can't get white gas for these, we'll run an unleaded fuel. And this goes in our primer cup around the mixer tube, and it helps us to prime our stove when we're using those other fuels. I would say the most important part of your repair kit is this guy. Look at that. It folds up super teeny in the repair kit, and it's got big old diagrams of your stove, the pump, and where all of these parts go that are in there. So if you take something apart on here, you forget how to put it back together, you've got a really easy diagram to look at. So don't just throw that away. It's really helpful, and it folds up to like that big in this kit. So that's awesome. Cool. So the first problem I want to talk about, these problems aren't really like in order. I've seen each of these things happen a couple times, but they're not really common. So I'm just going to start with the fuel tube bushing. Okay, that's where this plastic right here, where your fuel tube gets put in, and sometimes we'll see this plastic crack, the red plastic right here. And more commonly, we'll just see some fuel leaking out. And it's important to distinguish between, is that fuel that's just leaking out because I didn't put my fuel line in there far enough, or does this actually need to be serviced? So just double check to make sure your fuel line is in all the way first. And then if there is stuff leaking out of here, this needs to be serviced. So you're gonna need your stove tool. And you're gonna have to take the pump shaft out first. We know how to do that. So that's out. And then all we need to do, if you look on here, you can see those two little grooves. I'm gonna take the end of my stove tool. Good thing it fits right in there. That's what it's made for. And you can actually see on this, the bushing is rounded on one side. So we're gonna turn it out that way. If you try to turn it the other way, this corner is square and it won't turn, so don't break it. Turn it the other way. So we're just going to take it and turn this. It's kind of hard. Okay. And now I've turned it, and it might be hard to get out, so you can take your stove tool, and in the gap I just created right here, I'm just going to gently pry that off like that. Awesome. Cool. So what you'll see when you take that bushing off is you look in there, and there is a gasket in there. You just need to find something long that you can slip in there to pry this out. And this is awesome. This one is really, really dirty and old and like cracking. So you just go into your repair kit. I just pulled one out here, okay. And you find the one that's the exact same size, and you just install that in there. You just slide that in here. Use your extra fuel tube if you have one, or whatever tool you happen to have. End of a needle nose plier on a Leatherman, something like that. And now we just reinstall, after that's pushed back in there, we're going to reinstall this bushing. Same way you took it out, just pop it back in and turn it back into place. Almost do it with my fingers, I got to finish with the tool. And this bushing should be behind the gray body of the stove there. There's a little edge for it to go behind. So yeah, there you go, that's a good view. Just go right back in there. And now we just put our pump back in, and our pump shaft, and we're good to go. So a really easy fix is our fuel line. If something were to happen to this, maybe it cracks off in the middle or it's completely gone, all you have to do is pull it out like I just did. It just goes in that hole right there. And you have a new one in your repair kit, and we just shove it up into that hole. It's that easy. So that's a fuel line. Replacing the rubber sealing ring, your top ring on the pump itself. If you that basically, if it's just consistently leaking out of the fuel bottle right here at the neck of the fuel bottle, and it's not cross-threaded, you've tried, you know, putting this pump on other fuel bottles, and it's clearly showing that there's something wrong up here. So check the threads, make sure the threads aren't super damaged or cracked or something, and then you can try replacing this. And it's very simple. All it needs to, this is just rubberized, and all it needs to happen, you just peel it off. There, now you can see I just pulled it right down here. It's not threaded on there or anything. And you can take this off, slip on the new one. Make sure it's oriented the correct direction, the same way that this one was when you take it off. And you can try that. Next part we're going to talk about is the check valve down here at the bottom of our pump. This is where the air comes out. What can happen with these is if they get damaged, you'll get leaking fuel, and that leaking fuel will often come out right at the top of your pump shaft. So you'll pull up the plunger and there'll be fuel on here. That's a bad sign. So this guy in here probably needs to be serviced then. Not the end of the world, because you have a replacement check valve in your repair kit. So if you take your pump tool, on one end it's got this little screwdriver bit that fits into the slot on the check valve, and you can see the little tab right there. So just look at that, turn this the correct direction, and then it might take a little bit of prying through that teeny little slot to help pop this thing out.
As long as you're gentle with it, it'll come out of there. You can even use pliers or something. I'm trying to use my fingers.
Cool, so that's our check valve. That's what's inside that hole. And you have a replacement for this in your repair kit. So you can replace that as well. And it just goes back in and turns with the little tab on the side lined up to the little slot on that side. The next problem is fuel leaking out of your valve. All you need to do, stove tool, biggest opening on it, fits right around this brass bushing. Okay, loosen that up with that stove tool. And then you'll go to back this off and you'll be like, what the heck, it won't come out. All you have to do, open up, unscrew your valve. That's that valve assembly. And there is a washer right there. And that's your culprit. You're gonna have to change that. Cool, so once you fix this, when we go to reassemble it, it's important we do the exact process in reverse. So it's important that you put this on here, tighten it all the way down. Sometimes you gotta screw this on just a little bit, and then finish that off and screw that in. Don't do it in reverse. Don't try to put this on and then this on, because these threads need to line up so that this stove can turn all the way on and all the way off again. So if you did that incorrectly, then you might turn this and it'll just turn forever. One more thing I wanted to talk about is that we do have a replacement part in our repair kits for our fuel bottles. If your fuel bottle is leaking and the lid's on tight enough and everything, there is one of these O-rings right on the top of the threads inside of the cap. So you can just open this up and use a little tool such as a safety pin in here, whatever you need to use. You can probably even get it with your stove tool. But you can see right in the top of that, there's one of these rings. So if it's leaking, replace it. So as far as our actual burner goes, we know most of the fixes with this already. Cleaning out that jet, you already know how to do that. Cleaning out this fuel line. You can replace that jet, so just take it off like you would be to clean it and put a new one on. That's all you have to do. Make sure that the other parts in here are tight. There's a screw here on the top of the burner, and this holds the all these foil packs together onto the mixer tube down here. So make sure all that's tight and that your primer cup is tight. The one tricky thing that can happen is when you take this thing apart, your fuel line might come out unthreaded from this leg. So I want to show you how to re-thread that because it can be kind of confusing. So to reassemble this stove from having the legs fall off when you're servicing it, or the fuel line come out, I'll just show you this assembly really quick. Just get all your legs stacked back on top of each other with the legs, the burner side all facing the same direction, and the ground side all facing the same direction. They are a little bit different, as you can see. Get them lined up back on top of each other. Then slip them over your mixer tube.
Easy part.
So to reinstall our fuel line, find that gap in the bottom of the mixer tube and the one that's in the burner. We're going to go on the leg right next to that, and we want to go down through that leg, and then we just got to twist this around a little bit so we can get it to line back up. And then so it's lined up right there at the bottom, and it's starting to go back through here, and we just snug it up in there. Don't bend your fuel line when you're trying to do that. It should fit right back through there nicely. And it should be passing through this leg. It keeps things more compact, and it also is going to help us to not bend this fuel line, and it'll help our stove to sit level on the ground. So put it back through there, practice it a couple times so that you know how to do it, so that you can reinstall that. That's basically every single part on this stove, and if you combine it with the first video we did. So you should know how to replace all those things now and figure out these issues that go on. They can be kind of complicated, so just do it in a logical process and do some problem solving and figure out what the culprit is. And always remember that cleaning these parts with white gas will help. So you can soak these parts overnight in white gas. You can get white gas on a rag and wipe them down and just get them really clean. They get so much carbon built up on them. It can be pretty hard to get a good tight seal, things like that. So yeah, clean stuff, replace stuff. That's why we have replacement parts. And yeah, we'll get your stove running.